Most fantasy managers are drafting pitchers based on last year's statistics and not this year's projections, and that mistake is going to cost them. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested in seeing how you can use all the StatCast data and all the value data available to us to make better decisions to win your fantasy baseball leagues. And right now we're going to talk how there are several arms whose projection models have them significantly beating their average draft position, but the market hasn't caught up yet. So I'm going to walk you through and show you the data how these undervalued, I really wouldn't call them sleeper pitchers, but just significantly undervalued pitchers can return a huge return investment in the draft for you, and you may be able to get a significant value that help you boost and potentially win your championship. First pitcher we're going to cover is Freddy Peralta. On the surface, you may not be surprised because he's had some fantastic years and did very well. And you can see here from his StatCast data, he has a lot of really significantly high numbers in the 80th percentile for expected ERA, expected batting average, strikeout percentage, and so forth. But he's also returned 3 straight years of over 200 strikeouts, so he is a significant fantasy asset. However, you'll see he's being drafted as the 23rd pitcher off the board right now, somewhere near the 50s. So this is like potentially 5th round value. 5th round, you can get this guy with so much value, and I'm going to show you how the current projection systems are showing maybe even more significant upside value for him this year. And I'm just wondering why that is and why people are kind of still ranking him relatively low. Maybe they're a little bit nervous because he's moving from the Brewers to the Mets, and there's just some uncertainty with that. However, when you look at the ballpark factors, it's relatively neutral between both of those fields, so it should not have a significant behavior. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you follow my other videos and how I do this for hitting, I also do a pitching value ranking where I take the average expected stats. In this case, I took the top 50 pitchers. I originally did it with a broader range of pitchers. However, some of the average data was relatively high, like a 3.8, 3.9 ERA. And if you play a lot of fantasy baseball, you know that's really kind of relatively too high. So let's hold ourselves to a higher standard. So I took the top 50 pitchers and with their expected stats, and you can see here average, wins around 11, strikeouts 174, ERA 3.32, WHIP 1.12, and K per 9 high at 9.7. So these are kind of what we're aiming for to even beat these statistics. And you can see here based on the player rater value, once you get around that 50th pitcher off the board that these stats are based on, you're going to start to get significantly lower value. So we want you to draft as many pitchers as you can, delivering significantly higher value than that. I'm not sure how your exact settings are set up, whether you use wins, Ks, or Ks per 9. So we're just kind of do a rough average of a lot of these things in there. When we take a quick look at some of the projections for Freddy Peralta, even though he's been a really great pitcher so far, when you look at the projections and assign these value points to it, he ranks out as even better. One of the things I go through when I do this is it takes me a long time to kind of sort the data tables, crunch the numbers, run the projections, and I can't tell you how satisfying it is when you actually do the table and sort it, and it actually shows you that Skubal, Skeens, and Crochet are the top 3 pitchers. But this is where I was surprised to see that Peralta was actually here ranking as number 4 based on these projections. I took a combination of some projections that I trust, but I was a little bit skeptical, so I'll actually show you the impact of us using other different projection systems if you don't necessarily trust these. But I always tell you to find projection systems that you trust over time, because all these rankings are going to be based on future projections and so forth. So in this case, Peralta, he's projected to have a 3.25 ERA, 1.12 whip. He's always had a relatively strong K per 9 of 10.6. So all these things are really in his favor, and they're projecting 14 wins if that's still a stat with 199 Ks. So this is significant value that he can bring to your team. And he's currently the 23rd pitcher off the board on FBC drafts, which puts him around an average draft position overall in the 50s. So this is 5th return person you can get who can return significant value if they have the potential to potentially deliver the 4th highest performance of any pitchers that's out there. That's why it's so surprising to me that people are not really on him right now, or they're kind of laying off of him. I think they might be concerned about the move. But now let's go back, and I even did a pressure test of this because even I was a little bit skeptical of looking at the data, saying, is he really has the 4th highest value? Relative to his 50th overall and 23rd pitcher off the board type of projections right now. So if you look at the current stats, and you can see he returns a 7.06 value. That's why he's ranked fourth, just right here after the top three, big three. He kind of leads that next little tier here on this shelf. However, if you look at the Fantrax stats, it does kind of drop him down a little bit. 3.67 ERA, 1.20 whip, still high in Ks. And you can see if you plug those numbers in, he falls a little bit, but he's still here at number 7 overall, just falling off that next tier. If you go to the FBC rankings, which is actually really shocking, they have him as a 4 ERA, 1.2 whip again, and 188 Ks, and he still only drops to number 12 overall based on these projections. So overall, he's really looking like a top 15 for sure, if not a top 10 pitcher in value that you can have for the 23rd pitcher off the board or the 50th player off the board. So this could be someone you really want to jump on 4th round, maybe even as early as the 3rd round to return huge investment towards your team. So I started trying to dig a little bit deeper onto why this is, and I think one of the reasons why his performance is buoyed so strongly is because even with some of those rough projections, so here's the actual NFBC data that they have for him, and I'm actually also super thankful for the FBC. So if anyone in your league is using these to look at average draft positions, and this is probably the industry's highest, most used average draft position tool. You can see here he's getting drafted around the 50th or so overall. Current average draft position is about 65-ish. And based on their projections, these are the ones that show a 4 ERA and stuff like that. That's actually, would say there's a lot of downside risk, and maybe that's why people are kind of drafting him a little bit later, or the risk of moving to the Mets. But I think the reason why, and the trend you're going to see in this video, is the pitchers that I'm selecting, they generally have a synergist trend, which is they have a high K per 9 value or high strikeouts. So even with those, the NFBC kind of saying he's going to have a 4 ERA, he has 188 Ks for that, and his whip is still 1.21. Not as good as around 1.1 last year, but still pretty solid and won't hurt you too much in fantasy. So these guys have really strong. They're probably going to get lots of innings. They're going to get really high Ks based on their K per 9, and their whips are relatively strong overall. So it's really just a question in his rankings of where's the ERA going to land, and if some people want to take it on the high side, say it's closer to 4 rather than closer to 3.25, I'm totally fine with that. But what I'm actually kind of showing you here is, I would say of all these stats, predicting a pitcher's ERA from year to year is one of the hardest things and the most random thing you could do. I've owned Aaron Nola for many years. I know that thing bounces around all over the place. So whether someone's home run per 5 ball rate is a little bit high, or the left on base rate changes, that can really impact your ERA and significantly from year to year. So the fact that he has a really strong strikeout ratio, total strikeouts, innings pitched, and even in those projections, his whip is really strong. The fact that his ERA is the only thing, I'm going to take a chance on this because ERA is relatively a little bit random. You don't know where it's going to land, and if everything else is really strong, he's still going to contribute in every other category, and I think that's where the potential upside here is. I'm almost very thankful the NFBC is rating him so low, because I think this may chase some people away from him and keep his value suppressed, which means a huge opportunity to buy him on the other side. So now, if you thought that this was a really good value and someone you can have, I may give some of you players a little bit of heart attack or panic with my next choice here, because my next choice is going to be Blake Snell. And I know you're going to say he's definitely, before you jump in the comments, I'm fully aware of his injury and he's not going to be ready on time. But when you look at a StatCast, graph of this top 96th percentile exit velocity, chase, whiff rate, this is a type of profile that's hard to walk away from, even if he has some injury risk, or anyone who's owned him over the years, some of your blood pressures or your heart rates are probably getting high if you've owned him at all in the last 10 years, because it is always a question of the stuff is there, but it's always a matter of how many innings is he actually going to deliver for you. In most projections I've seen, he's only around 140 innings, which is relatively low compared to other players being 160 or 180. But when he's healthy and if he's on, I'll show you this, his value is significant to the team. So even only pitching in this projections 145 innings, he's grading out as the 7th best pitcher in these player values based on the projections for next year, even though he's being drafted at 27th. Now, I'm not telling you to take him number 7 overall, and he certainly may fall some more, depending on we get a true timeline about when he's going to start based on his shoulder injury. However, when he does pitch, if he's healthy, I think it's because buoyed by the same kind of things. His K per 9 is really high, actually higher than Peralta, and then he has the potential to have really high Ks. Even if he's only pitching 145 innings, he's still delivering significantly high amount of Ks, right? And so even then, last year, or some of his projections are 2.6 ERA. His WHIP is usually pretty solid at 1.16. So I think for him, unlike Peralta, where his question is really going to be where's the ERA is going to land, for Snell, it's really going to be, obviously, once he's healthy, how many innings is he going to actually contribute? And this is someone you'll see here in some of the projections as he's starting to fall. That's why I think if one thing I can tell you, or a reason to subscribe to this channel, is because we do not panic when we make decisions with data versus that. And you can see lots of people are panicking, and his value, his average draft position is starting to plummet. He was about almost a top 50 pitcher a couple months ago, but now the data's out that he might begin the season on the injured list, miss a little bit of time. We definitely need to monitor that. I'm not, saying that that's not an issue. However, you can see he's fallen significantly now outside potentially the top 100. And so what you can see here as a theme is that, especially like even in the stock market, some of the best times to gain a profit are when other people are panicking. So I'm not saying draft him really high like the number 7 pitcher off the board, but I'm saying watch how far he's falling. And I think if he's healthy and shows signs of coming back, and even if he plays 75, 80% of the season, the value that he can return in that 75, 80% of the season is certainly way more valuable around the 100th pick overall, the 10th round pitcher, that you could get. 10 player in your league can return significantly more return on investment if he can really is healthy and deliver that. No matter how many innings he gives, the ratios are just so high that it's really worth having, and let other people just walk away from him because they're too worried about it, and let you get an even bigger value. So now when you look at Blake Snell right now, currently being drafted around 73 and so forth, what other pitchers are around there? So you got George Kirby and stuff like that. So if you are a little cautious about his injury history and stuff like that, and you choose to draft Kyle Bradish or, maybe George Kirby if he's around instead, I can totally understand that. But if he keeps sliding, you're going to have to really monitor this to say, around that near 100 pick overall, maybe in the 90s, where should I grab Blake Snell and hopefully get a second half boost to my team, or even 3/4 of the season boost to my team, or other people were just panicked and stayed away from him because he was injured. So now let's, that's why it's so that for me, you've seen in some of the other videos, especially with some of the hitters, like Chase DeLauder on the hitter side. Blake Snell is like the Chase DeLauder just with more history, because these StatCast numbers look so good that I just can't walk away from that potential. And if the only thing is really the health and when he's going to be healthy, then I'm willing to take that chance, and I'm willing to hopefully get a significant value compared to other people in my league, so I can grab them a little bit earlier than they would and hopefully return significant investment by getting them. So now we'll get a little bit normal. So if you have been panicked out and you are feeling burned by a Blake Snell before and you don't want to take that much risk, I think Joe Ryan is a more bit stable choice as well. So Joe Ryan's had some great years in Minnesota. Now, obviously maybe not as top end, but this is someone who can also return significant value for you. He really nailed. He had a 3.42 ERA last year on expected 3.43 ERA. Buoyed really by really positive expecting batting average, good strikeout rate, doesn't walk a lot of people, so this is a very solid profile I think you can bet on. In the same way as you look at projection systems with him, Joe Ryan is really getting drafted currently as the 35th pitcher off the board. But based on the data and some of the projections, he's a top 15 pitcher based on these values. And even these projections were even saying he may not be as good as last year. He might be a 3.77 ERA, but he's the same kind of thing. If he's going to deliver high Ks near 200, because he's going to have good innings, because he has a really solid 10 strikeouts per 9 and a really good whip, then that's going to buoy his value, so that the randomness of the ERA let other people worry and panic and walk away from, because this is a relatively low risk kind of player who can deliver top 15 potentially player value in pitchers that you can have a lot later. So let's take a look at where he's getting drafted right now in NFBCs. So you can see here he's getting drafted 70th overall. So this is almost a 7th round player that you can potentially deliver top 15 value for pitchers. And this is someone who I would definitely take a chance on. And even again, I almost want to send a Valentine's Day card to an NFBC drafts because they're projecting him at 3.96, which is a little bit higher than some of the other projection systems that I've seen or used. And I'm totally happy that people that may scare some more people away from him or make them push him later in their drafts when I can really see potential for so much return on him as well. The next player up that we're going to talk about is Michael King. Now, this one's a little bit different story here because, when I started looking at the value that I'm about to show you based on the projections for Michael King, and then I'm a StatCast guy, so I went to a StatCast page, and it really looks pretty doom and gloom from his 2025 pitching, 4.27 expected ERA, even though he did okay with a 3.44. So this is almost you're really hoping for a return to form of what he can do in 2024. You're making a bet on that, and I'll show you in a minute. You're also still kind of making a bet on San Diego as a positive place to pitch, one of the most pitcher-friendly parks as well. So this is someone that you can get great value for as well a little bit later in the draft. So with the NFBC projections right now, he's getting drafted relatively low, 140 overall. And that's really, so you can get this guy late 14th round or stuff like that. And again, NFBC saying projecting an ERA of 4.0. That's not what I'm seeing across some other projection systems. And I think in this case, people are kind of forgot about him or walking away, not trusting the system. But in this case, I think this is one where you're really just banking on hopefully a bounce back to his previous year's 2024, along with betting on the ballpark, with the Padres ranking in the bottom 5 of ballparks in Major League Baseball as one of the most pitcher-friendly ballparks. I think that's someone that you can get significant value beyond the 10th round and so forth if he's really going this far behind. But if you look at my projection systems and my rankings based on the player value, even though he's going as the 55th pitcher off the board, he can return top 20 value this year versus the pitchers. So this is someone I think you can totally take a bet on. Now these projection systems are saying maybe a 3.1 ERA, 1.18 whip, but he definitely has that, a solid K per 9 over 10, a relatively low whip, so I almost don't care where the ERA is going to land. That's going to be pretty random, but he's contributing significantly high Ks, projecting almost 160 innings pitched. So this is someone I would definitely take a bet on in the later rounds, especially if could be a top 20 pitcher that you could get outside the top 10 rounds, maybe even 13th, 14th round. This is someone I would definitely look for, maybe your pitcher number 4 and so forth. So the next pitcher we're going to look at here is Nathan Eovaldi. And again, I really want to start with the StatCast data here because I know he's getting a little bit older at age 36, but he's had some fantastic years the last few years. And last year he was actually on a Cy Young pace. That's what really shocks me. He was really on a Cy Young pace before he got injured. So this is what I almost view of this is almost an out of sight, out of mind reaction where some leagues tend to say, okay, I'm going to fade old pitchers as they get older, and also guys, coming back from injury. But all the reports are he's fully healthy to start spring training, so we can monitor that as we go into spring training, depending on when your draft is. But this is another scenario where the StatCast data looks so positive from last year that it's tough for me to walk away from this profile. And I still think because of his injury, that people are kind of forgetting is how well he did while he was healthy. And this is another scenario here where he's getting drafted 162 overall. Right now he's getting drafted, near, 15th, 16th round. The projections are still saying, again, this is the kind of same type of story you can see here, depending on how many innings. He's not as high of a K per 9 guy, but his whip is going to be solid. He's going to deliver some Ks, and his, ERA is going to be okay. So this is someone I would take a bet on, especially since if you look here, Texas Globe Life Field has been also in the bottom 5. This is an average of the last 3 years data of ballpark factor. So I think you get a combination of someone coming back from injury who was performing really well, that amazing StatCast data, as well as combined with positive ballparks for pitching. This is someone I would definitely take a bet on. And let's take a look where he's getting drafted right now. Again, he's the 67th pitcher off the board, and I'll show you his value here in a second. But, after Alcantara, Trey Savage are gone. But with Chandler, rather than taking a risk on some of these rookies and seeing how they do, or Shota Imanaga here, stuff like that, I think Nathan Eovaldi, and here in this point and even higher, can return significant value for you. And in my value rater projections, you can see here he's around the 33rd pitcher. So someone who's getting drafted as like high 67th pitcher off the board, getting value in the top 30, 33. You can see here he's kind of here in this flat shelf here before it starts to really start to take a steep drop off. So he's kind of in this last tier of pitchers before the value starts to really steeply decline. And I think he's just being slept on because he's 36, coming back from an injury, and people are really just truly forgetting about how good he was last year before he got injured. And so this is a situation to monitor as he comes to spring training. All the reports I've seen are he's fully healthy, so this is something we can watch, see before you start to draft him. Now, I want to end this video on a few honorable mentions, people who I also think are really good and can return great value for you. And it's also the same type of stories. So one is Kyle Bradish. So he, missed a good chunk of the first half of the season, but when he came back, he was fantastic. So all these guys, I think, can deliver top 30 overall value in the league. And you can see here, another one is Nick Pivetta. In this case, his StatCast, you can see this trend why he wasn't in this, undervalued recommendations list, but it might be an honorable mention is because he was also, his StatCast data is not as positive. However, this is another one of Tampa Bay, bet in San Diego. If you're looking at those bottom 5 ballpark factors and who would have upside potential pitching in a very friendly ballpark, I think Nick Pivetta and of course San Diego broadly, some of that staff are places you can look for that later round value. And then Ryan Pepio, he had a pretty solid year last year. I expected, ERA was 4.02. He's had some good years and, pretty good years in the past. Everyone's waiting for him to take that next step. But one thing to keep in mind is this year he leaves that minor league ballpark and he goes back to Tropicana Field, which now puts him back in the bottom 5 ballpark as well in Tampa Bay. So I think there is opportunity here for a surprise upside with him as well. So I think these are guys that you can have, relatively later in your drafts, maybe not Kyle Bradish, but these are people you should think of who are, can return top 30 pitcher value potentially overall that you can also add to your league. And hopefully some combination of these 8 recommendations you can put together and, figure out how to make your team win combined with your other draft picks. So if this is the type of stuff you like to get in deep in the data, you should subscribe to this channel and then make sure you watch this next video because they say this will be the next one that'll be interesting to you. Just checking the deep on the data for fantasy baseball.